Hey there, I'm Mr. Terry. I'm homesick still. Welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. All right, I love the topic that our friend the Fat Electrician has covered because it is about the Berlin Airlift, one of the first big tests of American resolve during the Cold War in the wake of Soviet intervention. But we're of course going to get the hilarious take from Fat Electrician, so I'm excited to be able to talk about the history along with him. All right, original videos down below. Make sure you're supporting him. And if you like what I'm doing here, I'd love to have you as a sub and see you around more. In fact, we are dangerously close to 400,000 subs, which blows my mind. All right, let's get started. Man, I get red eyes a lot, but even more when I'm sick. I look like hell. Let's do this.
Yes, that time that communists tried to starve an entire city, so America and the UK teamed up to deliver 4.6 billion pounds of food and supplies to that city using nothing but cargo planes.
Yep.
Today we're talking about the biggest economic and logistical flex of all time, America's Operation Vittles and the UK's Operation Plainfield coming to...
What is going on with this tank top? It's like a guy on the sea of the communism. Like, what is going on here? Sorry.
Together to be known as America's Operation Vittles and the UK's Operation Plainfield coming together to be known as the Berlin Airlift. But first, a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Henson's Shaving. Okay, here's the deal. Henson's is a family-owned machine shop that makes parts for the aerospace industry. There's literally parts on the Mars rover that these guys made, and one day they woke up and they're like, hey, we're just gonna make the most precise safety razor on the market. And this is it. This is all they sell. It comes in aluminum or titanium. If you want to pay extra, it comes with a little stand. And then they also sell the razor blades, so you have a one-stop shop, not because their razor blades are proprietary, because this thing will take any shaving razor blade on the market. You don't have to buy their proprietary cartridge. You don't have to sign up for their monthly delivery thing. No, you buy this one time and then you can put any 5-cent razor in it and shave for the rest of your life. So the product itself is fantastic, but more importantly, the company is awesome because every time a YouTuber does an ad like this, they get sent a little media packet full of talking points, what to say, what not to say, and so on. Now, I'm not supposed to disclose this, but the brief that I got for Henson's basically said there is no script, do whatever you want, we trust you. Also, in the first paragraph, I love it when sponsors do that. This quote, if for whatever reason you don't get a good shave with our product, please let us know. If we can't help you, then don't endorse us. We think we've made one of the very best razors in the world.
They stand behind their product. That's cool.
We'd rather not ask you for a non-genuine endorsement. So not only are the razors great, but this is the type of company you want to support. I'll have a link and a discount code down below. Let's get back to the video. All right, important background info. After World War II, the Allied forces took control of Germany and it was split into pretty much 4 different chunks. The Soviets got a piece, America got a piece, the French and the British both got a piece. Here's a map of that right here. Okay, here's where it gets a little
that stuff, by the way, was already predetermined, you know, months before the war was going to come to an end. They wanted to settle these disputes, you know, and hopefully do a better job than what happened in World War I with borders and all that stuff. Plus, I think one of the biggest reasons why this happened too is the Western allies, like you see on this map, they don't trust the Soviet Union. They do not trust a post-Stalin Soviet Union or Europe post, you know, a post-war Soviet, you know, Stalin-run Europe. I think that's a big play. I mean, remember, they're allies because enemy of your enemy is your friend kind of thing, and they wanted to do this to try to prevent all of that. Also, for the Americans, it also for them meant that they didn't have to be the ones to go and attack Berlin. You know, Eisenhower and stuff, they were like, we don't want to be the ones to have to actually take Berlin because that battle's going to be nuts, you know? So they're like, well, it's already, Berlin itself already is going to be a jointly controlled city. So they're like, why risk it, you know? I think that's what he's probably going to get to now is now Berlin, you know, I'll go back 5 seconds. So if you can see here, the red section, that's the northeastern part of Germany, and that was already determined it was going to be part of the Soviet Union. And it was already determined before that too, that Berlin itself, its territory, you could see on the big map, see how it's different colors there, was also going to be divided up, that no one city was going to occupy Berlin afterwards.
America got a piece, the French and the British both got a piece. Here's a map of that right here. Okay, here's where it gets a little weird. Berlin was also split into 4 equal chunks. The problem with that was Berlin was 100 miles into the Soviet territory. So you have this little tiny speck on the map of British, French, and American territory completely surrounded by the USSR. While that is weird, it wasn't really a problem because right after World War II, everybody was still an ally. So America, the British, and the French had no problems using the roadways and the trains to get food and supplies to their section of Berlin. Now, part of it was people were allowed to move freely between the sectors.
Okay, we know that's going to change with the Berlin Wall.
So we're on the same page. Berlin and essentially all of Germany to a slightly
Rebuild
lesser
time.
extent is essentially a third world country at this point in time. Berlin in particular has essentially been turned into rubble from Allied bombings. The entire German economy is in the toilet, and all of the German people are not getting a lot of sympathy from the global community because, well, they kind of started it. Now, with the Allied forces in control of Germany, it is their job and their responsibility to help take care of the German people. Now, the Western powers, America, Great Britain, and France, they're all on the same page. They all have the same game plan. They want to go in, render aid in the short term to the German people, then in the long term, help prop up their economy, get them back on their own feet, and then they can leave. The USSR...
Well... They want to get their economy back on so they have exclusive business partners, right? They want, as much of war of post-war Europe, especially with Germany, to be a business partner, right? And American investors are going to want to go in there, get a lot of great exclusive rights and stuff like that. They saw it as an investment, and they would get a return on that investment. So you're going to see that with the United States pumping in billions of dollars here, and Berlin being one of the showcases of that, of building up their side of Berlin. Because let's be honest, when you're that territorially small and sharing borders, like, you want to put on your best face. So like the Americans, they want to put their best face of this post-war spending here in West Berlin, because it's kind of a competition. Which side of Berlin is going to develop faster? Right? Because there's an ideological war going on. Communism and capitalism are being tested here. Who can do the best economic rebuild here? There's a philosophical battle raging.
On the other hand, aka the communists, absolutely hate that idea. The last thing a bunch of communists want is people being able to take care of themselves, so they step in and they're like, no, absolutely not. We're going to build a communist utopia out of this place. So in order to stop the Western powers from helping Germany, they decide that they're going to print billions and billions of Reichsmarks, the German currency. They devalue the currency, so there's so much money that it's no longer a store of value.
Remember when Germany did that right after World War I, kind of in the early 20s, and the mark was literally worthless. So you get to spend like $1 trillion of them to buy like a loaf of bread. It was nuts. People were burning it because it was better as and more efficient as a fuel source for your money than getting coal or even wood.
To the point that it literally takes a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread. Because of this, the already struggling German economy completely collapses and a black market sets in, and the new currency for Germany is essentially cigarettes and food. And this goes on for like 2 years with the West.
By the way, if you've heard some current, some of the economic crisis in other parts of the world, this brought Argentina to mind. They had a very hyperinflation problem where a black market economy has emerged there because of again, inflation. Their Argentine peso is like worthless in the global scene, and people are now just resorting to a barter economy. It's really popular. People use what's the app? The WhatsApp, like WhatsApp, and make groups, and they just barter with their community for goods, clothes versus food and stuff like that. And that's a reflection of hyperinflation. Is you just go back to a barter economy where goods for goods, basically like our ancient ancestors.
Negotiate with the USSR on how to proceed. And during that time, the people of Berlin are quite literally starving and freezing to death, with the average Berliner eating less than 1,000 calories a day. Damn. Eventually, the West steps in and they're like, fuck it, we're just gonna do it without the communists because we have to help these people. So they create a new type of currency for Germany known as the Deutschmark, and it's gonna be seen as a real store of value and help rebuild the German economy. The Soviets find out about this and they freak out, basically break all diplomatic communication with the Western powers, and they officially want to break up and just have East versus West, capitalism versus communism, Hungary versus Fed. This is where the Cold War really starts kicking off. And the first ideological battleground of the Cold War is going to be Berlin.
I mean, in a lot of ways, yeah, you're going to get that Iron Curtain, when Churchill proclaims an Iron Curtain, and then this is like your first competitive site of this Cold War.
Because remember, it's 100 miles into Soviet territory, and a big chunk of it is still controlled by the Western powers. So the Soviets decide they need to take over that part of Berlin too. They can't have a little speck of capitalism in their communist utopia. Now,
by the way, part of that agreement too, to get goods into West Berlin, because you have to cross into Soviet-controlled part of Germany, part of those original deals was allowed. That you could, use the infrastructure to go from West Germany into East Germany into West Berlin. Those were part of the original agreements.
Luckily for the communists, it's an easy fix. They really don't have to do anything, because the minute the West Berliners see what a communist utopia really looks like, they're going to willfully and freely denounce capitalism and run over and become communists too.
And that didn't
right?
happen.
Wrong. That's never going to happen, because
opposite.
communism sucks. It's always sucked, and it's always going to suck. So the communists are going to do what they always do. They are going to basically present West Berlin the option: join or we will attempt to kill you. Because if you don't know, that's the dirty little secret to communism. They always talk about seizing the means of production. What they never bother to tell you is that people are also part of that means of production, and they will seize you too. So that's exactly what they do. They attempt to seize West Berlin. They blockade it off from the Western powers. They cut off every road, every railway, and every waterway so that the Western powers cannot get West Berlin food or any other supplies. And then they cut off the power to that section of the city, quite literally freezing and starving them to death until they comply. So obviously this is a diplomatic and humanitarian disaster. All the military leadership runs over to President Truman and they're like, hey, what do you want us to do? Basically, we got three options. Option A, we can start rolling tanks in and kick off World War III right now. Option B, we can just leave the Berlin people there to die. And option C, we can try to fly in as much food and supplies as possible, but getting enough to feed an entire city is basically going to be impossible. What do you want to do? Now,
so a public defense that the Soviet Union and really their puppets in Eastern Germany are going to use, because they did the same thing with the creation of, like the Berlin Wall, was that the East was going to be under attack, that they were going to get invaded by the West, and cutting that off was like going to be a prevention, going to be a way to prevent that. That's often been the case. Same thing with the building of the Berlin Wall as well. Just
obviously, I'm paraphrasing
defense.
a little, but Truman basically said, we're America, we don't start world wars, we just finish them. Also, and I quote, we stay in Berlin. Period. Which narrows it down to one single option. They are going to fly in enough food and enough supplies to try to feed all of West Berlin. Here's the catch with that. The American leadership has absolutely no idea what that's going to take or how to even proceed. So they go to the British government, who has just spent the last decade rationing their own people, and they have a great understanding of what it takes to keep a large population of people fed and warm. So Great Britain crunches the numbers, and they figure to get every single person in West Berlin 1,700 calories a day, it's going to be 1,500 tons of food every single day. In addition to that, since the power got cut off, they're going to need 2,500 tons of coal and fuel every single day. Okay, 4,000 tons, just so we're all on the same page, that is 8 million pounds of supplies every single day just to keep everyone alive. And
the only way to do that is load up some big old planes, because again, it's like you're flying into an island. Again, Soviet Union didn't like this little island of capitalism within their scope, I guess you would say, behind the Iron Curtain, if you will, because it could spread, right? I mean, these ideas could spread, and there was so much distrust there, and it's amazing how quick the distrust between Western allies and Soviet Union, how quickly that happened, with the war being over, and obviously it started before. I mean, so much of that started before that, but it's pretty crazy that it devolved so quickly.
the best cargo plane they have to work with at this point in time is the C-47 Skytrain, which has a maximum capacity of 3 tons, meaning that they are going to have to land 1,333 cargo planes into Berlin every single day. To put that into perspective, there's only 1,440 minutes in a day, meaning that one plane has to land every minute and 8 seconds. This is impossible. Despite that, the newly formed United States Air Force says, hold my nuclear bombs and watch this shit, because on June 26, 1948, 2 days after the Soviet blockade, they launch Operation Vittles, where they are going to try to feed an entire city via cargo plane. 2 days after that, June 28th, the UK says, hey, we're going to help too, and the RAF launches Operation Planefare, and together this becomes known as the Berlin Airlift, and right out of the gate, it is a complete and utter shit show. They're trying to fly in planes from absolutely everywhere. It is disorganized chaos. There's planes crashing, there's mid-air collisions. It's a complete disaster. And on their best day, they're maybe able to get 1,000 tons of supplies, less than a fifth of what they need. Now, at this point, the conditions in Berlin are getting worse and worse by the day. The communists are essentially laughing at the stupid capitalist pigs, at which point America calls up one of its main characters, a man by the name of General William Tunner. All right, this is a guy that coordinated all the logistics of getting supplies into China during World War II when they had to fly over the Himalayas. If anybody can unfuck this situation, it's gonna be him. And that's exactly what he does. So General Tunner comes in and he's like, here's the deal. We're gonna fly these planes like we're conducting an orchestra. There's 3 air channels to Berlin. The 2 on the outside are gonna be planes going to Berlin, and the one in the middle is gonna be planes leaving Berlin. For the 2 air channels going into Berlin, we're gonna launch 1 plane every 3 minutes all day, every single day. And those planes are going to fly at 5 separate altitudes, staggering every single time to give them just enough time to land. The Germans on the receiving end of this are like, we're literally starving to death. We got to help out the Americans and the British with this. So they show up and they start unloading the cargo planes for them. And they get so good at unloading these planes that they can unload all 3 tons of cargo in under 7 minutes and help get the planes turned around and sent back out. And this turns into one of the most beautiful humanitarian team
These are some of the logistical things, just to chime in, that I'm interested in learning about, because I don't know as much with the specifics of, with like, okay, the timing of the planes, and then the general. I hadn't heard of him. This has been really useful for me to think about and to be able to extrapolate. And when it comes to for me to talk about in class, I think the logistical parts of this will make it definitely sound, like, because the biggest thing I want to get out of this for big context educational purposes is to show how devoted the United States was to holding up their ideology. Like I was saying, this in the context of everything is an ideological battle between capitalism and communism. And in a world where the world has been destroyed in World War II, and there are 2 forces really at large here, and 2 ideological forces that are the only ones that really have the ability to remake the world, want to remake the world in their own image, and to show how invested actually the United States was. For me to be able to go and talk about these specific logistics can get that point across. But then also on the same time, we're going to be able to combat this with, the Soviets and how invested they were in doing these things, like what they've been doing already with trying to close it off and try to, get an upper hand that way.
Moments in human history. There's American and British pilots, aircrew members, mechanics, all just showing up in West Germany without even being called to help with this effort and to fly and repair these planes to keep them going around the clock. And then over in Berlin, the same thing is happening. There's Luftwaffe airplane mechanics showing up to help repair the American and British cargo planes to keep everything running. The 2 sides that were fighting against each other just a few years ago are now working together to save people. Everybody involved in this operation gets so good at what they're doing that the choke point that's holding up even more progress.
Is that I don't know, is that something that people should think about when they talk about the future of people that are conflict with each other, that they, will never be able to have peace with each other again? Like, is this one of those instances that you can use as evidence that, no, you actually can? That can happen. People can get over some of these histories and progress towards something healthier relationships, and can coexist.
They don't have enough airfields to land the planes on. So the Germans straight up build another one. The only problem with that was there was this big ass apartment building in the way. And when the pilots lowered their landing gear would only clear that apartment roof by like 20 feet, which seems like it would be kind of terrifying. So the Germans are like, hey, do you want us to rip that apartment building down? What do you guys want us to do? And the American and RAF pilots are like, bro, we just got done flying in World War II with you guys and the Japanese shooting at us. The apartment's gonna be fine, trust me. And sure enough,
you're living there. They're just saying, what, every 3 minutes? I mean, I don't know if every 3 minutes necessarily one is landing. They're taking off for sure. Maybe they had to hang out in the air for a while, but at least at the very minimum, if that was happening, big, huge jets like this, how could you even function as a society, like as a neighborhood, when literally your walls are probably shaking like they're gonna fall down, and you're going deaf from high energy, power engines here? That would have been crazy.
They start not only hitting, but exceeding the quota of 4,500 tons a day. And this infuriates the Soviets. This is the biggest economic and logistical flex of all time. There's nothing they can do about it. It shouldn't even be possible. And yet America, the UK, and the people of West Berlin are somehow pulling it off. At this point, the Soviets decide they have to try to do something to stop this, so they start sending up all their fighter planes to try to mess with all the American and British cargo pilots by flying too close. They're basically trying to mess up air traffic, cause accidents, do anything they can to slow down this logistical miracle.
Fighting.
However, it doesn't really work. Why? Because the American and British pilots know that it's basically a bluff, because it's essentially a giant game of fuck around and find out, because if the Soviets actually do anything, it's going to kick off World War III, and at this point in time, America is the only country on the planet that has nuclear bombs and a president that's not afraid to use them. Okay, if you're not picking up what I'm putting...
True, he said there. 1949 is when the Soviet Union will get their bombs. That changes things quite a bit politically and with decisions. Once both are now going to have those capabilities, it changes the tone and how much you can flex in a lot of ways, I guess.
Down, I'm trying to tell you that the American and RAF pilots are flying with the confidence of knowing that if one of these Soviets shoots them down, President Truman is going to bitch slap their entire country with the sun. Needless to say, they were unfazed by the Soviet harassment. How unfazed were they? Thank you so much for asking. Cue our next main character, Gail Halvorson, aka the Candy Bomber. He was one of the many pilots that was flying supplies into Berlin, and somewhere along the way, he decided that he was going to start dropping candy bars with little handkerchief parachutes out of the window of his plane over West Berlin so that the kids could get some candy. And eventually this caught on, and all the kids were waiting where the planes would fly over, hoping that they would get a candy bar. Then the American government caught on, and they're like, oh shit, this is a great propaganda opportunity. Imagine what it would be like if every single plane was dropping candy out of it. So that's exactly what they do. They start dropping a bunch of candy out of every plane, and then they make propaganda out of it. But then...
no, he's saying it. It's totally, you can see what the Americans are trying to do. They want to win the hearts of the Western Berliners, because again, this is them. It's like West Berlin, they're the influencers, and these guys are the marketing companies, and you go and you take care of your influencers, and these are like sponsorships, and you get them on your side, so you got good press, right? It's like marketing masterpiece by the U.S.
bigger because all the American candy companies start sponsoring it and donating even more candy to drop. And then it gets bigger because all the kids in America and the UK start raising money at school to buy candy to give to the kids of Germany. And they're giving out even more candy. And the Soviets have to stand there and watch as the Americans and the British are not only flying in a literal Costco worth of shit into West Berlin every single day, but they're dropping candy out of their planes like it's a fucking parade the entire time. And this is all going on while East Germany and East Berlin is eating potatoes and standing in bread lines, and it makes the Soviets look like the biggest assholes on the planet. Because not only are the people of East Germany watching the Western world essentially move heaven and earth to help out West Berlin, they're also watching the Soviets be more interested in disrupting America and the UK from helping people than they are in helping the people of East Germany. In short, America...
Well, what's going to start happening here, and this is, I guess, to connect us to eventually to the Berlin Wall, which is still years out, but people in East Berlin are going to start moving to West Berlin. I think a couple million over the time period, if I remember right, over 15 plus years or so at this time, we're moving to the West. There was more economic opportunities in the West, and a lot of those opportunities for high skilled labor, like doctors, et cetera, high skilled professionals. And yeah, they were moving. A lot of people were moving to the West. Maybe it wasn't two, was it one? I got to remember the stats on that, but it was a massive amount of people moving from East Berlin to West Berlin. And that was detrimental to the Soviet cause and for the Soviets just to have a functioning East Berlin. And what does a wall do? Right? It keeps people out, but it keeps people in too. And that migration and movement that people had from east to west, some did on a daily basis. You know, you work on one side of one sector or you live in one sector and move and work in another sector, you'd move freely. So that Berlin Wall came up under Khrushchev, that is going to, stop that. And that's going to still be kind of the symbol. Well, it's going to be the symbol of the Cold War really for the rest of the next decades, is that wall. But you can see now though where those sentiments, and now you can see why people start moving to the West.
America and the UK are playing to win, and the Soviets are playing to not lose, and it is leading to a lower quality of life for all of East Germany. As it turns out, Sun Tzu was yet again correct when he said, "The sun may rise in the east, but it sets in the west, and that's because west side is the best side."
But that's not what it means.
Really?
Not even close.
That might have been Ice Cube, actually.
Yeah.
Anyways,
That's
so now in
NWA or
retaliation
something.
for all this, America and the UK and pretty much the entire Western world are going to put a bunch of embargoes on the Soviet Union and punish them financially and economically. Now, the Soviets absolutely cannot afford this, but they keep telling themselves it's okay, winter is coming, and as soon as winter gets here, they're not going to be able to land all these planes, and this whole thing's going to fall apart. We just have to wait out long enough for winter to slow down
This
America
didn't last that
and the
long.
UK. So that's what they do. They just try to shoulder the financial burden and wait for winter to come and put a stop to this entire thing. Winter comes, and winter, it does slow down some of the flights, but here's the catch. America was also developing bigger, better cargo planes, and now America isn't just flying the C-47, America's flying their new cargo plane, the C-74 Globemaster, and as opposed to the previous C-47 carrying only 3 tons, the Globemaster can carry 25.
Oh my
So
God.
despite the fact that weather can sometimes delay flights, America and the UK continue to improve and increase the amount of supplies that they are delivering daily. And by Easter Sunday, 1949, they would break their
ended it,
own record,
though.
landing 1,383 planes in a single day, delivering 13,000 tons of supplies, which is 26 million pounds, which obviously is like 11.8 million kilograms or roughly 87 blue whales. Yeah, the United States Air Force
comprehend
and the
these
RAF
numbers.
shipped 87 blue whales worth of crap into West Berlin in a single day. And because of this, it becomes very apparent to the Soviet
Soviets
Union
pull out on
that
this.
America can
They
and
end it.
will keep this shit up forever if they
blockade.
have to, and they are finally forced to give up the blockade because they cannot shoulder the financial burden anymore, and that would come down on May 12th, 1949. And with the roads and railways to West Berlin finally open once again, the Berlin Airlift would come to an end after 15 months,
That's longer than I
277,000
remember.
flights spanning
15 months?
92,000
That was shorter
miles
than
and
that.
delivering 2.3 million tons of aid, which is roughly 4.6 billion pounds or 15,333.33.
Thank you for converting it to whales.
Blue whales. This
I need the whale
greatest
conversion.
Logistical and humanitarian feat ever accomplished, and the Western world did it with communism doing everything it could to slow it down. So in conclusion, fuck communism. The best way to support the channel is go buy some merch at thefatelectrician.com.
Dude, look at that jacket.
Quack communism. The best way to support the channel is go buy some merch
That jacket's sick.
at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang.
Wearing my
Out.
merch from him there. All right, final thoughts. Got a few other things to say. So just to summarize, this story, how it's going to be useful, how it's useful educationally is, again, a couple things. You can consider it in a lot of ways the first real head-to-head conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, right in ground zero of World War II. And so you see that. It also shows how, like I said in the video, but it shows how invested these sides were in Berlin. They had different strategies, of course. I mean, for the Soviets, they were trying to, again, make things difficult, right? And then, but for the West, it was trying to overcome these obstacles to put on a good face. Because, like I said, there's a global ideological war that's already begun. Communism, capitalism, and all the ways that gets marketed, right? Of conflating those with democracy versus totalitarianism or whatever. And all of these things are at play here. And the Berlin Airlift is, again, seen as it's kind of one of those first tests really for both sides. And if you're chalking it up to, victories there, you can see, the US, again, with the British can kind of, I guess, get that victory. If the goal was to shut off West Berlin, as, again, a successful little island of capitalism, I guess you would say, in a sea of communism, then, it's a victory that way. And for the West. But as we know, these things are just going to continue. The whole story of Berlin is not done here. Okay, you're going to see again in a few years. You're going to see the Berlin Wall go up, which really becomes a physical yet also ideological symbol of the Cold War. And you could see now the context of why that thing was built, because as you can see, the support in the West was very strong, and the growth there is going to be very attractive to people in East Berlin who are now going to be moving to West Berlin, thus building that wall, which is going to be said to be used for defense of East Berlin. But as we know, there was a massive migration issue that made East Berlin look bad, and that wall could be used to stop migration, which it did. It very much did. All right, with that, thanks again to Fat Electrician putting out some content here and hitting something I think very interesting that probably doesn't get talked about a lot enough. I don't know if you've heard a lot about Berlin Airlift in your own like education, but an interesting little note in the fascinating story of the Cold War. All right, with that, y'all, we'll see you next time. Bye.